Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's episode. Hopefully, my voice is loud and clear. Anybody who would like to get involved with the chat section, please just state the location you're listening from. It would be fascinating for me to know how far my voice is getting. Run towards your advanced civilization. Run towards the vision of a world that has access to efficiency. Human beings are changing creatures that find themselves in a changing universe. We are, to be honest, fragments of awareness to a very vast and multidimensional changing system. That means a person's knowledge always has limits because there are states of being where the consciousness, in some sense, goes out of focus. So you can say it's like conscious waking state. You've zoomed in as an individual, and in the, let's say, deep sleep, you have zoomed out of individual existence. When I think about the concept of a civilization, for me, the conscious waking state, the biological human body, is a technology being used. That means I find the user of technology to have nothing to do. The person inside a car driving the car is not the car. And so I have concluded, based on my own inner realms, that really what has been moving in this life is not in language. And it was a very profound moment. It was a moment where I had seen all my ancestry, you know, step into the illusion. And I had realized I had stepped into it too, but then I realized what could have been in the place of my misery, suffering, and ignorance. And then I kind of saw life as if it's a candle, as if you can see this candle in many ways. It's like a candle is lit every day when you wake up or every lifetime. And so, as this candle is lit, it's as if a certain design comes into motion. And this design has been so magnificently set into motion through the passage of the DNA, through lineage after lineage, that it comes into the world with a stance, with a familiarity of that it's as if I am not just walking on the earth, but I was designed out of it. The glory of human civilization is how far we stay true to our inner vision. And the inner vision comes and goes. I find imagination is not something the person can own. It's like an antenna. You know, you're in a parking lot, bad signal. You're outside of the parking lot, great signal. And if you take that which is measuring the signal to be attitude, and if the attention of the being makes one conscious, it's like they say this in the film industry, behind the scenes, that it's like if you don't control your attitude will control you. And similarly, man gets influenced by not just the actions of others, but by the actions of himself in the past. In other words, civilization is a technology, an advanced technology, and the members of the civilization are the users of the technology. Now in 2020, the human being has access to enough technology to revolutionize itself, to revolutionize its behavior. And eventually, where our world is going to be divided between simulations and the truths of nature. Sometimes I have touched trees And my mind playfully has fathomed, like, 400 years from now on, where children will only see in history books and digital archives that there once were trees. Even the caveman found something to draw with. And the way the human mind, I feel, works is that it is not put into a world where things should be done for it. And it doesn't mean things shouldn't be done. It just means that we were the first conscious step out of the cycles of nature. What before was the ecosystem that held our imagination has now become our own responsibility. And so, what that means is man is consciously doing what nature was doing for itself. It is the step away from the collective mind and thus being rendered as an individual copy. And this has been, of course, a very profound theological debate, where people were wondering, or what the reflection of being a reflection of some divine agency or God would imply. And so it's kind of like an attitude where the technology doesn't just need to evolve, the user of technology requires to evolve. That means it's like the more advanced the user is, the more the technology can update. The less advanced the user is, the less the technology should update, or there will be dangers. Now, I think it's a good thing. I don't know how this is going to begin, but I feel enough human beings will be born that are going to ask themselves, why not an advanced civilization? And those who are open to the idea of ushering in a new advanced civilization, we must comprehend that realistically we can't control it into existence. So, the cool thing about man's free will is that he has free will over his inner realms. But when it comes to the outer realms, you must respect the unknown, as if the presence of the mighty has, in some sense, blessed the eyes of stone. And so, what I mean by that is that the human psychology is so fascinatingly put into motion that I wondered. I remember in one of my talks, I had kind of metaphorized it in the way as if there is water in a cup, and some person comes and throws this water while spinning their hand into a pool that's in front of them. And so the water is at a certain angle with a certain spiral like motion entering the pool. And so what that means is what the human being is reaching a state that is fascinating, so interestingly, like an administration of the most sophisticated content found in movement and the most sophisticated content found in simplicity and stillness. And so the mystics, the yogis, all those ancient human beings who did not forget nature's voice, they remembered that there is a part of man's intelligence that is running with the world. That means your atoms are conscious of all the other atoms and they are moving with it. It's very fascinating because when a person studies intelligence, it's not limited to the human framework. And the human being is that rare animal that could see more than itself, and that's why it evolved. And without trust, life is not given an opportunity to move. It's as if, like Wayne Gretzky, this Canadian hockey player, incredible athlete, he had this quote where he said, it's like you miss 100% of the shots you take. Any moment in your life where your mind has fathomed and potential effort to display and in some sense deviates from self-expression, the self that rejects itself. How, what that means is, it's like, have you ever missed out on something in life and you were like, gosh, what's wrong with me? And that moment is a recognition that you weren't aware of what is fully in the room. And when it comes to the multidimensional sense of self inquiry of creatures in a singular dimension, it has to mean that we require more explorers than teachers. So forget the students, they're all explorers. Forget the teachers, they have all become explorers. And so it's a massive collective exploration project. And when you connect man's minds, something unique happens. When 8 billion minds efficiently advance, you know what that would mean? That would be like kind of like a beehive intelligence. It would mean that there is ultimately something we care about. This is something I didn't know, but it fascinated me when I figured it out. Did you know beehives that they have a queen? And if you take the one queen from one beehive and put it in another and take the other queen from that beehive into another, the moment the bees realize that their queen is not their queen, they feel it's an imposter, and all the bees in the beehive try to kill the imposter queen. And so what that means is we function of if you take the concept of the beehive queen as a value, common world we all live in. If the source of it deviates, then we all resist it. I mean, the cool thing is that a person can't just exist like a statue. Life is meant to be animate. That's why there is a sort of on and off switch effect to nature. I can say our minds are solar powered, you know, and our body, like our minds behave like light, but our minds are based on light. Our bodies, and they're based on light too. I mean, if there was no light, what would there be to comment on? So there must be some light in the room, you know. That means before we can consider the user of technology and the technology, there has to be a location for the world to exist in. So it's as if, like, you want to know about where your location is on this planet, you're somewhere in the world. And then you want to wonder about the location of the whole world, and you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Could the location of the world be within? And that's when suddenly the mind comes into motion, and the ability that we have, and how the mind is like an invisible limb. It's not like an invisible limb, but it's like it's like the attention's roaming capability. So in order to be able to at least attempt to visualize an advanced civilization, we must think about the at least some behavior of a member of the civilization we can see in that, like if you were to fathom an advanced civilization, it has to realistically, you have to be able to realistically visualize some behavior in it. What that means is like every person's mind is trying to attempt this colossal problem, and every mind gets a certain extraction of data. In Sufi dervish culture, from those dervishes that lived in, for example, 700 years ago, 1,000 years ago, in the city of Nishapur in Persia, these dervishes, they acknowledge to some degree, and of course, what I'm saying, there's various viewpoints on it. I'm just sharing mine. This was something that was told to me, of course. My father actually told me. And so what it was that in the Sufi dervish culture, there were these four platforms or stations of mind, you know. In certain mystical, I can say, traditions, acknowledge. I mean, even in it seems to be a hadith, authenticated, ascribed to the prophet of Prophet Muhammad. But anyways, the idea is that the soul has stations. It's like it has ranks, and souls of the same rank suddenly notice each other, you know? But anyways, what I'm trying to say is, so forget that rank thing. It's I'm trying to tell you the Sufi mindset of the evolution towards the ultimate. And the first state, you can say in these four levels of Sufi evolution, there was the Rend. The Rend, I think the translation of it would be the gamer, and this would be the human being who had become aware of all games and had become aware that any game sincerely you conducted for a while, suddenly you access its deeper dimensions, and then the deepest dimension of the game requires an evolution of the whole game, of the world of the game. So what that means is that this is a state of mind where you see everything is like part like a design in a program, you know. So when language is suddenly becomes like code for you, like the matrix, you become aware of the authorization of existence subjectively. Language is the most important thing. It is the inner structure of our civilization. The cool thing is we're all in the same world. The cooler thing is that we all have different viewpoints of the same world. So you can say civilization is like a dot in the circle, and every living human being is a different degree of it. Running towards your advanced civilization means the inner effort to perceive one. And I think really the scholar's mind is fascinated by the vastness of the cosmos, not disabled by it. There's some people that if a system evolves too fast for the intimidation of the change of the habitual way they understand their environment could just like break their archetype. I feel we should navigate a subjectivity. We shouldn't be it. That means this is why even the concept of lying can exist, because we're entertaining an artificial linguistic simulation to be an individual. So we have a dependence, believe it or not, an unconditional dependence on language when it comes to communication. That means we don't just move as an object, we also move as a subject. And so every person is a subject in a grander subject where we call humanity's vision. In order for anything to advance, we cannot ignore novelty, which means the past no longer gets the loudest voice, but it doesn't mean the voice of modernity forgets the past. The question arises, how do we build it if we have to respect the past and the future for the same at the same time? I feel we should create a yin yang civilization. We tend to have this impression that civilization should be only in one way. But language is a dualistic technology, and as long as language is a dualistic technology, we're going to always constantly try to be, we're going to be caught in the endless game of right and wrong. I feel right and wrong, what is right and wrong should be replaced. All of morality should be, changed to efficiency and inefficiency. Efficiency means the opportunity and value of the lifetime is high. That means if you want to, like, think of it this way, before greatness externalizes, you have to feel as if there is something great about your life. And that greatness doesn't mean that it has to be validated by outside sources. It just means that your eyes are open in this fascinating world. And this world has not been fully explored. There's so many things that people don't know. And language is something very new. When you take the time span of the history, it's as if a second ago language evolved. And so now we are creatures that have not objectively evolved, but the objectivity has gone towards the metamorphosis, a sort of subjective evolution. And now we are various ways of perceiving the moment. That means if I ask you, think about your whole life, even though you have been the same person, you are like one sense of, um, like there's a you and then there's a name to this you. And so this name and this feeling of awareness as to existence is what has remained. That means even though I have the same name, it's kind of like, kind of how Heraclitus said, no man steps into the same river twice, and it is not the same man, and it is not the same river. In other words, literally, if you were to try it, you would put your foot in the water and you would be hitting different water molecules than the second time you put your feet into the water. So it's not the same part of the river and it's not the same person because time moves forward. So as long as there's time, evolution is the game. Beyond time, I feel it becomes, in some sense, the movement of the unknown. So literally, our free will exists in a sphere of knowledge, a sort of wavelength of sensory acknowledgement. I find that running to an advanced civilization is better than accepting an inefficient one. Now, the thing is, it's like we're trying to run towards a skyscraper that hasn't been built yet. So, the first stage would mean acknowledgement of the landscape, and then we build. So I feel it's like right now, human beings, their subjective realms, a certain percentage of it is being communicated, and the nature of the actions they do throughout the day and the nature of the environment, the ecosystem they're in, causes that. So it's as if you're not just influenced by your own voice, you're influenced by the voice of the world, by the voice of your environment. That means it's as if like it becomes difficult to smell roses when you're standing beside a dumpster. You know, it becomes difficult to think about poverty when you're in a giant mansion, imagine. So reality is very, how can I tell you? There's so many ways that we can refer to it. There's so many ways that the attention can animate what exists. So let's think about it this way, that the user of technology is an unknown movement. That means like suddenly somebody could get emotional and AI could be set loose. You know? So it's like thinking of known and unknown dimensions to the technology and the user of technology. So I can say an advanced civilization would be a civilization that reflects the freedom of the individual in a collective way. So that means it is ultimately we can't have the, so that means ultimately any sort of governing power in the future is just going to be a resource station. And people will, the user of technology will have elevated to a point where it doesn't need to use the same technology. Life is like uh, the conscious waking state is a moment where attention is aware of its content. And so a lot of existence is objective content. You're physically moving, you're doing stuff, you're involved with action even for your survival. But it is in regards to subjective movement, wondering about the unconscious, wondering about the presence of the mind, wondering about who is really looking through your eyes. And it is so easy. The easiest thing is to say that there is nothing because it all starts from there. You know, that means it takes no effort. You know, it's as if asking someone why they did something and they'll be like, there's no reason, I just did it. You know, it's like, I could do it, I did it. And so suddenly the thought comes that there is this space first before the stuff comes in. And so intelligence is also a space for what moves in this intelligence. And of course, guys, I'm just one person sharing ideas. The universe is so vast that, and the mind is so advanced that endless perceptions are roaming the surface of this earth and beyond. And it's really what attention brings to life. That is the moment. It is the navigation of attention as a presence before the personality is anything. Because if you consider it, since you, let's say 10 years ago, who you were, how has your personality as a human being changed? And you'll see that the scope of your experiences has shifted your identity. So it's like on some level, we have to distinguish between the subjective realm and the objective realm, which for the first time means human beings must acknowledge they're present in two dimensions, not one. So then, in that way, we realize we must respect the inner space of every person because we have an inner space too. I call this the multidimensional renaissance when all human beings begin sharing um, how conception is received internally, and when they do, we start seeing common patterns between our inner realms. From one angle, life is too dynamic to define. From another angle, it's so static, any definition it can become alive. And this is the cool thing about the mind. I am like, if there's two teams, two philosophy sides, like a soccer game, I'm on the side of Rene Descartes, where he says there's a mind and body dualism. I feel that, of course, the brain is an antenna receiving life, receiving the free will. I don't feel that the brain is uh, uh, it is an evolutionary projector of a subjective existence, that when that subject wonders how it's an object, it is witnessing both simultaneously. It is the acknowledgement of attention, at first having no value and then having a singular value. Then from the singular arises the dualistic. You see things as good and bad, chaos and order. You suddenly have opinions on everything. When anytime a person enters a dualistic frame of mind, duality is what you require to build infinity. So what that means is, it's like loops require duality. This is why the singular mindset, this is why the New Age community running after oneness is a way of kind of uh, trying to evaporate individual responsibility. You know, it's so many people on this planet, they see a world and they're trying to function in that world to the best of their ability, let's say. These people that like these creatures on this rock in the middle of nowhere will at some point realize, after all their individual fantasies and desires have been met, they are still on a rock in the middle of nowhere. And nowhere is the beginning space where all our subjects come into form, and then they become information that defines us. And so really, when you are moving in life, the mover is an experience, there's no belief. But when the moment a person becomes static, horizons of beliefs, various ideological spectrums can arise. A person's mind has the ability to see the simple in the complex, and the complex in the simple. As Plato would say, as above, so below. And Mandelbrot brought the concept of fractals in mathematics. So what does that mean? That means even in a mathematical scope of reality, we can see patterns in the small and the big, and in the big and the small. So what does that mean? That means we're being conscious of duality. Okay, guys, sorry. I gotta make this part one. Part two is gonna be soon, guys. I gotta go right now. Much blessings and awesome.